All right. And I did throw in the chat there the PDF that has the questions for part 2, just in case anybody needed that. I put that in there now before I forget. All right, let me get my screen situated and we'll be all ready to go. All right, so this is Complete Streets virtual workshop. And I'm so glad that you all could make it today. And definitely at any point, if you've got questions, or if I've said an acronym or a term that you don't recognize, feel free to raise your hand or speak up, and I can always stop and clarify anything. So quick overview, it's the same stuff that you saw on the registration page. So part 1 will be a crash course, just briefly going over what Complete Streets is. Part 2 will be the policy intro and outline. So that'll be a bit more interactive. We'll go over outlining the type of policy that you might want to form in your community. And then the third part is pop-up planning. So thinking about doing any sort of temporary pop-up events in your community, the things that we want to think about, and a little exercise as if you were planning your own pop-up as well. So crash course. So the first thing is Complete Streets are for everyone. So you want the streets to be safe and comfortable for all users, whether that's a cyclist, someone walking, driving. And the other thing to keep in mind is that there's no singular way to do Complete Streets. You don't have to check all the boxes. It's more about just thinking about your street and trying to figure out ways to make it more accommodating for all users. And even in a community level, not every street will necessarily look the same. So what makes a complete street? And these are some of the features. Like I said, you don't have to check all the boxes. You don't have to have every single one of these items. So these are just some of the features along a street you might see that are part of what makes up a complete street. So for pedestrians, you might have installation or improvement of sidewalks, high visibility crosswalks, whether that's signage, having curb extensions or curb bump outs that helps raise visibility as well. Curb ramps or tip downs, as some people call them. Tactile paving, that's the kind of bumpy surface you see before a crossing. Adequate lighting, curb extensions I mentioned, and also thinking about benches for folks who might not be able to walk as far and need to rest. Bicycle improvements, that would be new or updated bike lanes, paths, paved shoulders, and also things like bicycle amenities, bike racks, pumps, tool stations, things like that. Road diets, so maybe that's removing a through lane, adding a bikeway or bike lanes, narrowing vehicular lanes. So road diet is when you take a look at a street or a corridor and kind of look for opportunities to calm traffic or make a more vulnerable road users such as pedestrians and bicyclists safer. So some traffic calming measures can be reducing curb radii. So when you go around a curb, if it's too wide, people might drive a bit faster, so you can reduce that to slow speeds. Speed bumps, I'm sure we've all been over a speed bump. We definitely slow down when we go over one of those. Speed feedback signs, we're starting to see a lot more of those up here in the North Country. So those are the signs that it'll tell you what speed you're going. And then rumble strips, and those can be on the sides, or sometimes on interstates, they'll have them across the lane to kind of give you a heads up that there might be a rest stop or slower traffic ahead. So here are a couple of visuals of the things I just mentioned. We got rumble strips on the top left here, some of that tactile paving. This is a speed bump, kind of, but it's also referred to as a table crossing. So it's kind of combining a crossing and a speed bump. Here's an example of that turning radii, and you can see the original radius was all the way out here. So they just brought it out a bit, and it makes the crossing shorter and it slows down vehicles. Brightly colored bike lanes. I don't know if you've ever seen any of these before. I know that there's some in Albany, New York with this bright green color. I was not a fan at first, but this is nice because it can add some character and raise the visibility of cyclists. And again, benches and having those amenities that are along the street, but not necessarily embedded in the street. And a bonus element you might want to think about as well is incorporating green infrastructure. So having areas where there might be trees or some sort of vegetation, so that can manage stormwater. If your pipes in the community might get overloaded with stormwater, green infrastructure is a good way to mitigate those stresses. And it also, greenery tends to lower the temperatures in areas as well. And it also just kind of creates a nice environment to be in. So what does all this stuff kind of look like? I found this really fantastic example of the street here and having it reimagined, adding in complete streets elements. So we can see there's lots of greenery that didn't exist before. We got new lighting fixtures. We got the travel lanes with two different materials between the travel lane and the parking lane. So it visually makes it look smaller and tends to slow down drivers. We got wider pathways. So just all sorts of good stuff here. And you can see it looks a little bit more lively. Of course, they've photoshopped in people, but you know, the second picture looks like a place that you want to be and hang out for a while. So why do complete streets? Aside from them looking nice, we've got economic benefits, health benefits, and also equality benefits. So economic, lower costs for person themselves. If you're choosing to walk or cycle, you'll have less cost for your transportation. And kind of folding into health, you might have lower healthcare expenditures as well if people are out walking more and cycling more. Increased activity and spending. So increased activity acts as a natural surveillance in the area, and businesses also benefit from more sales. They've done studies that pedestrians and cyclists tend to spend more than drivers. And also having increased activity and more spending is an encouragement to private investment in tourism. And bonus, with streets that have bike and pedestrian infrastructure, they typically have higher property values, which generates more tax revenue. So health, I kind of already hinted at this. There's an increased opportunity for active travel. Sorry, my notes are a little messed up here. Yeah, increased opportunity for active travel. So obviously getting people more active. Reduced travel risks. So there tends to be higher crashes in most of the rural areas in the US bear the burden of crashes. So if you got safer streets, you can reduce those traffic risks. And also, complete streets have been found to be around 30% safer than streets without complete streets components. And also reducing isolation. So if you've got older folks or people who can't afford to drive or don't have the ability to drive, they're still able to get out and be part of their community. And studies have shown that residents are 65% more likely to walk if their neighborhoods have sidewalks in them. And then the last part is equity. So having a street that caters to different types of transportation in turns usually has a more diverse representation of people. Accommodating measures benefits everyone. I think probably one of the best examples are curb ramps. So typically we would think people with strollers or people who are in mobility aids need the curb ramps, but they're also beneficial to delivery workers or elderly folks who aren't so good at stepping up on things. And then lastly, all this stuff mainstreams those who are typically disadvantaged. So those who need assistance or accommodations such as curb ramps don't do that because of their own limitations, but rather that the built environment has limited their movement. And the word mainstreaming, just define real quick, is incorporating and normalizing the needs and experiences of everyone. So again, going back to Complete Streets is making sure that everyone has space and the ability to get where they need to go. So last part of this crash course is where Complete Streets have been done in New Hampshire. You can see there's not any in the North Country yet. We're working on that. And I've highlighted the 4 towns in green. I highlighted because they are towns of populations from 200 to 2,000. So just to highlight that it doesn't necessarily, it's not only for cities, it's not only for larger populations. Towns and communities, all sizes, have adopted Complete Streets over the years. And that's it for this part. So I'll open it up to questions if anybody has any questions for this part of the presentation so far. Eric?
Getting back to, and maybe Kim, you'd like to chime in and correct me as I make a lot of faux pas, but we have our current issue seems to be raised our intersection in town, our main intersection, and just the fact that it's been an ongoing problem. We've had crashes over the years, and trying to come up with a solution as to how to solve this problem short term, I guess in the intermediate future and long term, and depending on the day of the week and who you speak to. And I know, Katie, you've said you've been through town. Some people seem to really want a roundabout. That seems to be a solution to our problem. I hate to, again, I know this is a general discussion, and I hate to individualize it, but maybe it'll fit in. A roundabout, then you talk to somebody else and they, oh, no way, there's just simply not enough room. And then most people seem to agree that possibly a 4-way stop with rumble strips. I love the idea of, I know that there's somebody as you approach into our village section who has talked about creating greenery and slowing traffic down naturally that way, organically. And then I'll just wrap it up naturally. I've been in New Jersey a lot. That's where I'm originally from. So I've seen a lot of the speed mounds. I've seen a lot of the speed bumps. Is that problematic for snow removal in the winter? So I'll stop there. And I don't know if anybody can address those issues.
Yeah, that's one that DOT likes to bring up as well.
Okay.
Do you know, JB, are there any that exist in New Hampshire?
I don't think DOT is allowing any speed bumps on their roads, but it's something that you can consider for your own Class 5 roads. Yeah, I don't think you could. I'm not aware of any examples, and I know in attending many meetings with them that that's always shot down because it's not something that they do. Mostly for what you cited, for the for maintenance reasons. It's just really hard to keep up with.
Understood. Do rumble strips cause a problem in that regard? Snow removal?
From my so I come from I'm in Southwest New Hampshire, where a lot of that's why I think Katie invited me, because we've had a number of Complete Streets policy passed in our region, and we're pretty rural. I mean, we only have Keene's really the only sizable town in our area. There are actually examples of those transverse rumble strips on a couple of instances on our roads. There's one outside of Peterborough when you're coming down a long hill into a roundabout. And it was designed, it was because people were going too fast down the hill, and they needed to really warn people to slow down. But the thing about rumble strips is that they make a lot of noise. So if it's an area where people are going to be sensitive to that ongoing road noise, it's probably not a good choice. In this particular area, it's kind of out, it's pretty rural. There's a senior housing nearby, but it's way up the hill and pretty far away.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Actually, if it's okay, I'll try to answer another question you had, which is this idea about a roundabout and people having different ideas for the area. Typically the way that we go about it is if you already have a safety issue, I first diagnose the problem, find out if is there speeding there? What is it that what's the issue there? Is it speeding? Is it safety for pedestrians? What are people concerned about?
I'll try to make it quick. Speeding, yes. That's on the main street. The cross street, which is perpendicular to Main Street, is you approach that in one direction. Like you approach it from the interstate, coming off the interstate in one direction, and the other direction is our bridge over the Gale River, and that seems to cause a visibility problem. There's a crown to the bridge as you're approaching it, so I think you get people running that flat. Currently, there is a flashing light right now, a red light in one direction, I believe a yellow light in the other direction, and that causes a little bit of confusion, especially for people. We have a lot of visitors from Massachusetts and out of town, and that seems to cause a little bit of confusion sometimes.
Yeah. And is there a crash history there?
Yes.
Were you saying earlier that you did a road safety audit was done at that location?
Yes, it was completed. Final report was completed in December of 2014. Road safety audit report, New Hampshire Route 18 at New Hampshire Route 116. So
Yeah.
they're both, I guess, both technically state roads.
Right. I don't want to take too much time,
Yeah.
on this, but typically, I'm not sure if that was who did the road safety audit, but if New Hampshire DOT was involved, what they do now, at least with the road safety audits, is they hire a consultant that'll diagnose the problem and come up with alternatives to fix that intersection. Did they do that, or was that not part of their process?
I think they, same here. I don't want to, I don't want to hijack the hearing here. They addressed some of the issues, but obviously, our residents have made it clear, especially in the last incident that was about a week and a half ago, about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, that it has not addressed a problem enough in a short word. Yeah.
Well, I'll follow up with Katie maybe after the meeting and talk about, maybe share some ideas that I might have for follow up on it.
I would love to. And, maybe I can share a little bit more of the report. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I wonder if we could convince DOT to do another audit. 2014 was, getting a little bit ways ago now. And, if the trend hasn't changed at all.
Yeah, if it didn't solve the problem, I would think you could bring them back to the table.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think it's simply a matter of increased traffic, whatever it is, a pandemic or just increased traffic, people coming up to our beautiful town, yeah.
Going to the pancake parlor.
Yes, there you go. That's
Awesome.
the Sugar Hill. I don't want to usurp your Sugar Hill.
Oh, yes, yes, I know. But they do have to go through to get to you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, there are definitely some things we can discuss afterwards regarding this. And I know I did start the conversation with Kim, and I was working with DOT, and then it kind of, I never got a response at one point. So we can nudge them again on this. But awesome. Does anybody else have any questions about general complete streets before we go into the policy? And after the policy section, I'll see if we want to if we've got time, we can take a little 5-minute break. I know 90 minutes is a little bit long, but not quite long enough as either. So I'll check in with you guys. All right, so the policy. Let me get my screen situated again. All right. So before I get into this, I'm actually going to cross out the word policy and replace it with strategy. One, because one of the policy types is policy, and I don't want to confuse. So let's use the word strategy. I think it is a little bit more usable. And two, even when you go back into your own communities, talk about these things, it might be useful to use the word strategy versus policy. Policy, could have some connotations attached to it, and you don't want to derail a productive conversation about improving your streets just because of a word choice. So strategy types, we've got an ordinance. So that's something that's legally binding and enforceable, and the legislative branch is involved. Resolution, which is by far the most popular or most frequent kind. And this chart over here is all the policies in the US, a breakdown of what all the strategies in the US, the breakdown of who chose what. So resolution is almost half of all the complete street strategies. Policy comes in a close second. It's more involved in the resolution and requires a vote by town officials. A plan, it can be included in your master plan or your local plan. And it identifies more specific needs if you've got particular projects. And then guidance is more about the design standards, and it's created in a way that is tailored to your community's needs. So strategy ingredients, I'll call. These are 6 different things to kind of think of, and I believe I've captured this in our worksheet. So you're going to want to find the purpose and intent of your complete street strategy. So describe your vision, the goals, and the desired outcomes of the strategy. Define the users and modes that the strategy will cover. Types of improvements. So what types of projects does it apply to? Is it only going to be for new projects? Is it going to be for only maintenance? Combination of both. Design standards. Now, as I mentioned, one of the strategies is completely design standard focused, but in all the strategies, there should be some sort of kind of design guidelines that you want to point to utilize as you do your projects. Exemptions. So you want to define any types of situations where the strategy wouldn't apply. So you might have environmental impacts. You don't want to have a negative impact. Maybe there's some safety issues. There's just not enough space to do something. So you want to define in what situations you would not apply the strategy. And then most importantly, almost, is the implementation. You want to make sure you have a plan set out how you're going to implement the strategy. And I guess the heading on this is a little bit confusing, but this slide is just outlining a couple of the ways in which you would implement the complete street strategy. You're going to want to have public input. You can put it, like I said, in your master plan or your local plan. And then also pop-ups is a way to work through and figure out what kind of complete streets elements that you want in your community. And that's kind of a foreshadowing to the third part. So before we get into the worksheet, does anybody have any questions about what I've mentioned so far?
JD, I would just, if I could add something, I think you can have more than one of those elements as well. I would, our experience in the Monadnock region has been a lot of our towns have adopted policies and then developed something called design guidelines, where they, Katie said at the very beginning that, you know, you don't necessarily have the same approach, complete streets approach for every street in your town. You know, maybe some parts, your downtown is maybe a place where you're more likely to have pedestrians and so you focus on maybe more complete streets elements that you're suggesting be incorporated into the design. Whereas if you're out in the outskirts of town, but you still have people that maybe are walking dogs or whatever, maybe you'll have something in there that says, well, we want to make sure that our shoulders are at least wide enough to accommodate people. We notice we don't have any shoulders. It just drops off into a ditch all of a sudden or whatever, you know, so you can have more than one, you know, one of those elements. And I think the more you have, the more it's all integrated. It's helpful in keeping things going with implementation.
Yeah, that's a good point, JB. Thinking about, you know, your network, and you've got your high priority roads that's got lots of action, and then your lower, not I want to say priority, but your lower volume roads that you wouldn't necessarily put in curb extensions because there aren't curbs, but like you said, paved shoulder is still desirable. Great point. Anything else before I move into the first exercise?
Yes. I do have a question regarding, you know, how different is the approach when the road that is involved is a state maintained highway versus a town maintained highway?
JB, you want to take that one?
Sure. In our case, what happened is there was, during the development of the policy, there was coordination with the maintenance district and with DOT about developing the policy. So there was good communication with New Hampshire DOT about what the town wanted to do. That's what important first step. Second, if you're going to do any sort of guidelines on what you'd like some of the state assets to look like, you know, going through those design ideas with the state. I found that, you know, I think you'll hear from the Commissioner of Department of Transportation. She's recognized that a lot of state highways are towns' main streets in New Hampshire. And so there's a balance that you have to reach for those types of places where you want, you know, the local towns want to have active, you know, places where people will go to shop and eat, but you also need to have that safety and mobility that the state wants to have so people can move through the area. So I think it's about communication, and the way that it's been approached by towns in our area, as they've talked about what they'd like to see happen on those state roads, and that they talk about coordinating with the state in their policy on those types of roads.
Okay, thank you.
Definitely always, if you get anything from this webinar today, always coordinate with DOT. Bring them to the table as early as possible. And actually, our first question, starting to outline the type of strategy. And before we start, I'll say this sheet, if you don't fill this out or if you weren't able to print that out, that's fine. You have it to use. It's a way to basically kind of start thinking about how your strategy would look. We'll call it a policy or resolution. I'll probably slip up and say that anyways. But kind of getting a rough outline out there, and it can be something that you can bring back to your other select board members, or if there's any other part, if you want to talk to the town manager, whatever your situation is, this is a good kind of tool to get the conversation started. So first question we want to think about is, what are the departments or people involved in the decision-making process when it comes to transportation projects? So we got DOT, we definitely need that down. So for this section, I'll have you guys kind of write down your answers, and I'll call on someone, or if someone wants to volunteer. And I do have some answers kind of after each of these that I'll throw up. But give you guys a minute or so to think about what kind of parties need to be involved. Anybody want to volunteer, or I'm gonna cold call someone? You want to go, Eric?
Oh, yeah. Well, since Kim is on the webinar, Kim Cowell's our town administrator. I think obviously our road agent would be involved. He's in charge of projects.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the issues that you raised, I think, might involve buildings and grounds person who's involved. Obviously, some of our safety services people would be good to get their input. Police,
First responders.
First responders. We have a very active life squad in Franconia that serves, whether it's mutual aid or otherwise, they serve a lot of the area. And the fire, and also the fire department, which ends up, whether it's in town or up in Franconia Notch, as well as our police department and life squad too. I'll leave it at that, and hopefully somebody else could chime in and bring up a lot of the things I forgot.
And it's slightly different depending on each community has a slightly different thing, and I'm still learning that because I'm not originally from New Hampshire. So the difference between a highway department versus a road agent versus, the couple different names for things depending on, the size of the community or whatnot, or how they've structured their local government. But I think that hit a lot of the key parties. Is there any kind of key ones you think are missing, JB? Or
I could add some to that if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
Sure. Well, you want to reach out to the users of the road. So that would be the business folks or the residents wherever this road is going through, anybody that's using it on a regular basis. That can probably be your biggest help because they know the issues that go along with it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was going to say something like that. I mean, I think I was talking to Katie about this yesterday, and I think, I don't know if I want to use the word buy-in, but this is new and different for a lot of towns, and change can be hard to overcome. But really, this is about common sense, about safety. If something's, this is really what it boils down to, is making our streets safe. If we have people that want to use the road, that want to walk or bike on them, then this is about making sure that they feel comfortable and that they actually are safe. And then Katie talked about the first part of the presentation about economic benefits, and there's, when you make an area more aesthetically pleasing, which these kinds of design changes tend to do, it's about hopefully going to lure more investment into the community, more private investment, and people will fix their properties up or they'll be able to sell their property potentially for more money if they're moving a business or something. So getting just the general public involved, I think, is a huge part of this.
Absolutely. And I think it's important. I think about this a lot in my position as, you know, an expert, is to put that aside, because the community members, the people who live and breathe it each day, are the experts in this situation. And even between, you know, an older adult has different needs than a child. And I think it's important to also, if you can do any sort of school type of input session, that's always great.
Katie, I think
Yeah.
I was remiss, and maybe Kim would agree with me also, and she prompted me. We have a lot of local, since we're a very outdoors community, we have an art walk that's been going on for about 3 years along Main Street. And we certainly have bicycling groups in the area, and we certainly have trail groups in the area, you know, conservation groups. So I think they're also a good resource to draw on.
Absolutely. They can help with that gathering support and input, because they all have their own membership bases and interested people.
An interesting thing about trails is we've got a lot of rail trails where I am, you know, a lot of towns consider that part of their complete streets network. So when they're taught, so one of the concepts you'll want to think about with complete streets is connectivity, and making sure that there are no gaps, you know, where in the common places that people want to walk and bike. And, you know, people don't necessarily want to drive to a trailhead and then walk. You know, if they can walk from downtown, you know, if that's, or from wherever, you know, that's really nice to have that option. So, you know, think about your trail system as part of your walking network.
That's a great point. Yeah. Connectivity is a great word. Yeah. I should have had a whole slide of, you know, kind of transportation planning buzzwords like that. That's for another webinar. Stay tuned. So, yep, we went over all of these. So the next question is thinking about what do your current plans and policies or procedures say, and how far do they go already? Does it just mention one type of user? Does it do a pretty good job of covering everyone? And this question is to think about, you know, where can this complete streets policy or resolution kind of fill in the gaps or strengthen what you already have in place? And I don't expect you all to have memorized your local plans. So if no one has any answers, or you know, we struggle with this one, that's fine. But it is a good question to think about, and you can always do after the fact, go back through and read. Anybody want to share an example? Or yeah, Carl.
Yeah, I'm thinking of complete streets in a little town of 500 people where the local metropolis is Franconia. And our complete street, there's maybe a half mile through the center of Sugar Hill Village, which extends from church through the village center to a graveyard, I guess, on the far end. And the way I look at it is there are public places. You have the town building, you have the museum, the fire department, the graveyard, and any connection between any of those two that's improved a little bit is worth doing. And it's like down in Franconia where you have the art walk connecting a bunch of places, and then further on New Hampshire 18 you come to Coffin Pond, where there's two pull-offs one right at the pond and one that has a trail that goes a half mile or so between the river and the pond. So one thing we like to do is have a trail that connects those two pull-offs. And every little piece that goes in 200 yards makes it possible for someone to park. So like by the town building, we have the town building, then the museum right next door. And the museum just purchased a house a few years ago as an example of a 1930s style little house. And across the street, we have Harmon's, a cheese store, and an old post office. And just anything that adds a tiny bit to the landscaping or the repair of the sidewalks between those buildings and another 100 yards to the meeting house, and then maybe a pathway to get to the cemetery would be an addition. And I think that for a small town, it's just trying to make those incremental improvements is what we're talking about. We don't have the buildings like you showed in your slide of the example of the complete streets.
Yeah, and it might be a good idea if you feel you got, you know, the support there and kind of the organization to do the types of improvements you need, to have a policy in place so that when you go for funding, you can kind of point to this and say, you know, we're serious about this. We've, you know, adopted it as something, you know, going forward. We haven't gotten through it yet, but you know, part of it is, are you doing it only on new projects, maintenance, combination of both? But that might be a strategy that you might want to take if you got it pretty well established and you just want the extra kind of documentation, supporting documents for future applications for funding.
What you're suggesting is that I don't know what's in the plan about connections or sidewalks or whatnot. We've had some discussion and taken away of sidewalks in one place.
Oh, wow.
But what you're suggesting is if the plan says our goal is to make the town more walkable and have more places where you can go from point A to point B, and some of which may be named, but some of which are just there in the plan. That then if a project did come up, you could say this is consistent with the town's plan.
Absolutely.
And then footnote, Katie said so.
For sure you'll get funded after that then.
All right, that's all we need.
Yeah, so I mean, your master plan, if you have a transportation chapter, that's a good place to put this. But even when you're talking about land use or something, if that the village of Sugar Hill is the place where you want to have you know, walkability, you can talk about that in your economic development part of your plan, or your land use plan, or the transportation plan. All these things connect with each other, and the more places, the more coherent your vision is, I think the better.
Yeah, a lot of overlap, which is good. Two birds with one stone. Great. So yeah, my example is you know, our local master plan outlines walkability, but it doesn't mention specific elements to achieve that. And it doesn't do a great job at talking about cyclists or public transit users. And I just wrote these answers. I didn't have any town in mind, so don't think that this is me going through. I live in Littleton, for instance. This is just a made up town in my mind. So the next part is thinking about what kind of benefits or outcomes you're hoping to get out of the strategy. So we've talked a lot about connectivity. Maybe that's something that you're looking to have more of. So this is kind of, what are your goals, essentially? I like the words benefits / outcomes better, but what are your goals? What do you want to get out of this? And this one should be fairly easy to fire off. So if anybody just wants to unmute, speak up, kind of the types of outcomes they're looking to get out of the complete streets policy.
I'll just chime in because since I've been on the board, I've seen the ebbs and flow, up and downs of our village district. I'll call it. We've hit a nadir, and we're all of a sudden we've gotten some critical mass and some buzz going on. We have a new market in town where we had lost a market locally, and we didn't have that walking. I really, my benefit or outcome would be that overlay or the picture that you had of a town with some greenery and people walking around, and have some defined sidewalks. We have a couple of buildings in town that the building itself and maybe the land around it could use some sprucing up. We were, as Kim will attest to, we're trying to get our temporary sign and our sign policy a little bit more in place so that could be a little bit easier to enforce. But I think that could be the goal for Franconia, that walkability. With the help of the North Country Council, we developed a mixed use plan a couple of years ago. We passed a regulation/ordinance to try and promote that. So I think that would be our ultimate goal, without getting into too many specifics, but maybe somehow working toward that, if that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So walkability and going back to the intersection, it sounds like there's some safety concerns. You want some safety improvements. The speeding is part of it.
Yes.
And trying to think what you would call kind of the greenery, but maybe like building a sense of place kind of thing. That can be one of the outcomes.
I love that term, sense
of place.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. Yeah, I do. We did, I think, again, I keep on referencing Kim. I'm sorry, Kim. But I think we, at one point, the board had worked on a project called Safe Route to Schools. So, that's in a nicer weather. And even in we have some hardy souls in our student population that take I teach up in Littleton. So on the way to school, I see some of these kids biking to our elementary school in town. And that's concerning for safety, just to create a better environment for them to get to go through town.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Amazing. Are there any other outcomes we haven't mentioned? Anybody else got any other ideas that we haven't talked about already?
I was just going to mention one thing, Katie. All over New Hampshire, we have, our population is aging. And according to at least national statistics, as we get older, less and less of us will be driving. And we don't want to be isolated. We want to be able to, Katie brought up before, this idea of isolation. We want to have places where people can bump into each other. There might be, improving walkability is a way to do that. And then Eric brought up the kids too. While our populations are aging, we're also seeing less and less young families moving in. Do you have a goal in your town to keep your community sustainable and keep those businesses going and their schools going? Do you have a goal in your community of trying to attract young families? And this is a one way of doing that as well.
Absolutely. I can kind of speak for myself and my general friend group, but we're hearing and seeing kind of my generation, even younger as well. They don't want to have to rely on the car, and they want to be able to walk to things. Like I chose Littleton because I could walk to a grocery store, I could walk into work. Those things were very important to me. I probably could have gotten a lot cheaper rent somewhere else, but at least I can walk places, is what I keep telling myself. All right, great. And I really like this next question, and we kind of already touched on this. What is a reason or reasons, there could be more than one, for adoption of a policy that can consistently rally support from the community and its leaders? So you might want to think about going back to those local advocacy groups, or, you know, kind of extracurricular groups. What is the community passionate about? What kind of groups already exist that would help in this, in getting your community to achieve these goals? And it goes back to the kind of the three pillars: the equity, health, and economic benefits. And JB mentioned this one yesterday, and I didn't put it in my slideshow, but also environmental, which kind of gets wrapped into all this as well. So anybody think of any local groups that they think, or you know, just kind of community action that's happening that can help support this?
This is Ben from Lancaster.
Hey, Ben.
Hi, how you doing? And
Good.
Thanks for doing this. I think probably a big group would be a local chamber of commerce. Obviously, you get complete streets, that would drive more activity, more pedestrian focused activity to a downtown area that could see better economic vitality. Recreational groups, whether it be runners, bikers, walkers, senior groups. Seniors like to recreate, and they want to be on nice, safe, and attractive sidewalks. Lancaster, we're very fortunate. We have a great main street, and people come from all around just to walk up and down our main street and our sidewalks.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like town organizations, your local conservation commission, that's your environmental group that could rally some local support, and they might be able to gather some regional or state support. That's kind of it for as far as I've got for now off the top of my head.
That's pretty good. That's pretty comprehensive. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I think kind of sitting down and thinking about these things, you've got more resources and more in your community to help get this started. You're halfway there in some of these cases with kind of the support and activity out there with the different organizations. Is there any other ones that anybody got a super special group in their community that they want to brag about? Great. Well, I think I just kind of made up, you know, there's a local group that is looking for more equitable communities, and another group that focuses on the physical well-being and being active. So we touched on that. So moving into the next part, this one should be pretty quick and easy. So what kind of users or modes you want to include in your policy? Ideally, of course, you would say all, but I know a lot of the North Country up here, there isn't necessarily public transit, so you can, you know, leave that out of your policy. Or if you think it's, you know, really only feasible to do pedestrians, and you don't really feel like there's, you know, cyclists might not necessarily come through, you can always start off small and revise it as you go on, but thinking about what types of users and modes you want to address in your policy. I'll just skip over that one because we've only got about 4 to choose from anyways. So, and kind of digging a little bit deeper, and we already talked about this a bit, is there's different needs of different ages, people with disabilities, minority populations, lower income residents. So in what ways can this strategy include their needs as well? So I think what you're going to want to do is, you know, for certain things like older adults or people with disabilities, there's already kind of some pretty set things, like you want to make sbut there's tip downs and wider pavements and such. But But for populations that you might not be as in tune to their needs, you're going to want to do some targeted public input to understand what they need out of the policy. And what exceptions? So I kind of already mentioned a few. Does anybody have off to the top of their head any exceptions that they think they would need to include for their community or would want to include?
What do you mean by exception?
So are there any situations you can think of that applying the complete street strategy might not be appropriate? Any sort of limitations? I did give the answer away earlier in the presentation, but it's okay. I don't expect you to remember. So typically, I think there's mainly two, right, JB, but you can fill in if I've forgotten any. But usually if there's not enough space or if it's going to be too expensive to do something and won't allow the project to go forward, or if it's not safe. And then also, if there's any environmental impacts that can't be mitigated, then obviously we don't want to put together a project and force a complete street if it's going to negatively impact the environment. I think those are the two.
Those are the ones I've usually seen. And another one I throw out there, kind of like this, it's a little different maybe than an exception, but so, you know, we've got a town that just decided to focus on their downtown only. So not all of the roads in their town. Because they figured this is where people are really walking and biking. So this is where we want to focus our energy.
Yeah, I think that is appropriate. And yeah, instead of it being, you know, outlined as an exception, just the overall policy only applies to a certain area. But you would want to clearly define that in the policy. That's a good point. All right, I'm trying to tick along here because I know we did have some great discussion, but I am mindful of time. So talked about this a little bit before. I'll briefly go over this one as well. So what types of projects would it apply to? You might want to only do it on new construction. Maybe you do a mixture of new construction and maintenance. You know, kind of decide what you want to do based on feasibility, or, you know, just what you think you can get the town behind if they only want to do it on new projects and don't want to try to incorporate it in the maintenance for whatever reason. But thinking about, again, kind of that exception thing, only applies to downtown. Does it only apply to certain types of projects? And so the next question is, how do you ensure that this is incorporated in new projects and the work done? I think there's really only about one or two answers to this. And the main one I have here is maybe you want to have like a little checklist or a worksheet included as part of the policy. And it's not that it's you know, a binding thing, but it's more of, you know, kind of reminds people to think of these things when they're going through and planning the project. And I do have an example of that I could share with you guys. And was there something else you mentioned, JB? Another type of strategy one of your towns took? So
let's say your road agent has a list of roads that they want to, it's kind of like what you're presenting now, but that you create a process with your road agent that he's, you know, checking the box. Well, like you say here, checking the boxes as to, you know, looking at what the opportunities are to make a road more walkable or an area more walkable.
It's kind of like
an alternative scenario of how you might fix that road. And maybe that means you have to ask for more money at town meeting or go after a grant or whatever it is.
Kind of like create a plan of sorts. Like this is, you know, the next thing we'll address, and so on and so forth, to kind of outline the priorities. And
Yeah, another thing you can do, another idea is, if when the town does an annual report every year, make an effort to talk about what did you accomplish that year as it relates to your complete streets policy. That way you're holding yourself accountable. If you want to take yourself seriously about, it's a way of keeping that on the radar and making sure that you're getting work done.
yeah, that perfectly goes into the next question. Thinking about how you're going to show that you've made progress. And there could be all sorts of different ways that you do this. I'll provide my example first, and then if anybody has any other ideas that they think, you know, think outside the box here. There might be different ways that you can kind of, you know, show your progress. So I've said the success of the policy will be measured on the number of miles of sidewalk in the network, as well as categorized into good, fair, and poor. Good meaning sidewalk is in great condition, little cracking or signs of wear. Fair, showing signs of wear, replaced within the next 10 years. And then poor, it needs immediate replacement. And I think it's good to have kind of two measures here, because if you're not necessarily adding to the network for one reason or another, maybe it's too expensive, maybe you've got the network there, you still want to be able to see, oh, you know, we had way more poor or fair condition sidewalks at the beginning of this year, and we were able to upgrade a good, you know, however many feet or miles or whatnot into a good condition. So you want to measure both the amount, but also the condition of it as well. So I don't know if there's any other ideas off the top of your head of ways you think you could measure success, whether that's I don't know, I don't want to say less crashes, but possibly, you know, thinking about what the crash history looks like in the area. You know, on years where you've got kind of normal traffic, I think if you were measuring crash history between last year and this year, you might run into some trouble. But any other ideas that people have about measuring the success?
I think we're, you know, at I guess it's an inflection point. I think it is. You know, I wish Kim, you would chime in here, because Kim seems to have a better handle on these things. But looking at some of the questions you've posed, and I don't know if you've addressed the signage, maybe how how signs organically are woven into the fabric of the community to make sure people movement is done efficiently. You know, one of the things that we're having done now is, and I won't get into the funding issue, but we have a welcome center that's on the verge of getting started, and that'll put a new face on our community. We're going to have you know, the poor condition of our parking lot is going to be improved at the town hall, which will lead to the welcome center. I'm not sure if there's a question in here anywhere, but I think you know, the strategy questions for a complete street is really appropriate as we go forward with this project. And it's important. Signage, pavement, and how this welcome center is going to look when all is said and done. We have a public hearing that's about to happen in about a month, so we'll get some. I'm sure we're going to get some really constructive and hopefully helpful and a good critical information from our residents.
Yeah, I think that's a good good example that you have there, and I think kind of at the top of my head, a couple things you could do, maybe do slightly informal, but have some sort of a method to it, and North Country Council can help with this type of stuff, but having a somewhat of a count before and after you make upgrades, if you gotta make improvements on the Welcome Center, does there seem to be an increase in foot traffic, or just having whoever mans the Welcome Center, if it does have some sort of person there, seeing how many people stop by, or talking to local businesses. Are their profits increasing? Do they feel like they've seen more foot traffic, more transactions, that type of thing? Counting is always good.
Yeah, so surveys is a way to do a lot of this data collection. One thing I was going to say is, you could do it on a before and after for projects that you do. What conditions are you trying to improve with a project? Let's say we take Eric's example of, the downtown, where they're not sure if they want to do a roundabout or a four-way stop or whatever. But it sounded like traffic calming, was part of it. And so you could do a before and after with, a speed study, which I think North Country Council can help with.
You signing me up for stuff
to show that it actually works. And of course, this is all really important for keeping momentum going. For you're showing that things are happening. You're building in accountability to the public. If you're probably putting in some capital investment, so you have to show that this stuff is worth it, and that's where these measures can come in handy.
Absolutely. And help prove for future applications too, like, look what we did. Awesome. All right, so that is the end of this section, and due to time, I'm just gonna keep plowing through if that's okay with everyone. And we can always go a little bit over if people want to leave, that's fine. We've got an exercise here at the end, but so now we're going to talk about pop-up planning, which is probably one of my favorite things. So pop-ups are temporary installations of streetscape changes. So we got a few examples here. On the left, we got a temporary curb bump out. On the right here, we've got maybe a parking space or a kind of just bare part of the road has been turned into a nice little sitting game area. And they can be for a few hours or a day to a whole weekend or a whole season, depending on, a variety of reasons. But typically a weekend is when you do them. So maybe one of the features is to increase pedestrian safety. So you want to do curb bump outs, curb extensions, or improve crossings. If you're interested in increasing cyclist safety, you'll want to maybe do a temporary bike lane or some new markings on the road, or add bike racks, bike amenities. Maybe you just want to, as Eric likes, the sense of place. Maybe you want to add some vibrancy, and also you can add accessibility. So adding seats or places to rest, curb ramps, widened pathways. And then kind of the extra things like art and play features and greenery. So this section here, this has been taken from the Tactical Urbanism Guidebook on design, materials and designing for pop-ups, which is a fantastic resource. I will share it with you guys afterwards. These are the key focus areas to think about when you're planning your pop-up. So having barrier elements, which are things like planters, bollards, maybe some cones, and they're used to delineate uses and also help with safety and accessibility. You got surface treatments, so you might use things like paint, which could be solid swaths of painted areas. It could be lines, it could be striping. And this again helps with safety and accessibility, as well as it could be vibrancy if you kind of have somewhat of a mural on the road. Street furniture, so that increases accessibility, as well as adds vibrancy, community elements. landscaping features, so having greenery, maybe you have some turf, lighting, tents for shelter, rain or sun, depending on what day of the week here. And that adds vibrancy to cool the area if it's a hot day, or even manage stormwater. As I mentioned, the plants are, you know, good at soaking up that water. Signs, you kind of talked about this, Eric. So I talked about this in terms of pop-up, but you know, it could be applied. Pop-up is a temporary complete streets essentially. So signs can be used for increasing safety, wayfinding, and it can also be used to provide education opportunities during the pop-up. So maybe you have a sign next to, you know, you have some kind of sign set up somewhere telling people what the pop-up is about, educate them about why the pop-up is happening. And then outside of this is community. So, or not outside, woven into all this, I would say, is community. So maybe you have yard games, you could have activities planned, food trucks, classes. And one of my favorite examples from, I think it was Keene, they had reading walks where they took pages of a children's book and laminated them and put them every so often kind of on a route. So families could read the book as they also do a nice little walking loop. So some of the materials I already mentioned, temporary paint, chalk, tape. You can borrow, maybe your highway department has some stencils, or you can make your homemade stencils from, you know, piece of cardboard. You cut out the shape of a bike and you use that as a stencil. Or signs, you can make homemade signs. Tires, crates, pallets, hay bales. And also thinking about, are there local businesses or again, your local departments that have things that could be donated or borrowed for the event? So this is taken right from that guide that I mentioned, the Tactical Urbanism Guide. And this is from Portsmouth. I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago this was done. But I just love this example because it's, you know, just quite simple. They put planters and cones out and, you know, painted the curb extension. And like I said, this serves two purposes. It's shortening the crossing distance as well as slowing down cars going around the corner. And it doesn't necessarily, this one doesn't have any sort of kind of the community type, you know, vibrancy, but it still serves a purpose. It's showing the community what the potential is for improving the area. And their budget was quite small, 2,000. I mean, you don't, looking at these materials here, you could probably do that for much cheaper. You probably already got cones, paint pretty cheap. You don't have it already. So just quite an easy one to do. I like this. And this is taken from JB's area. Was this in Keene or Jaffrey? Keene. This is a before and after. You can see, you know, there wasn't much happening on the sidewalk here. And then they fit in a bike lane, temporary bike lane, and all of this nice seating area. And if you want to talk a little bit about, you know, putting this together, what that was like.
Yeah, I mean, it actually was a lot of work. You can see all the greenery. We did get donations from like a greenhouse, a local business that allowed us to borrow it. We ended up having to rent a truck to ship all that stuff there. We had to get volunteers. We were doing a bunch of these, so we were, you know, there were some supplies that we purchased. You can kind of see the bollards on the left-hand side, and that's just to kind of simulate a bike lane. This is in Keene, so it's a little bit more urban. And there was even, we even invited local musicians. The whole point of this is to get people to experience it and to see if they like it. You know, and if they like it, then this could evolve into something real and permanent. So to get people there, it's not just, you're not only trying to just pick up people that are kind of walking by, but also making it a little bit of a destination. So we had musicians, We had activities for people to play, play games. And we also had educational materials about why we were doing this in the first place, which I think is important to have at least people staff there to do that, or have some signage so that to make it obvious, so people understand what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the great thing about pop-ups is there's so much flexibility with it. You could put as much or as little effort into it, depends on what you want to get out of it. So it does provide a lot of flexibility. And a couple important notes, and this is taken right from the kind of lessons learned from the Keene pop-ups. Get started early, as I already mentioned, get started early with any routes that are DOT routes, so state roads. Get support from local officials, leaders, businesses. We've gone over this a couple times already, very important to include them. And if you can, I mean, if there's already an event happening in town that you can kind of coordinate this with, so you've already got some, people that are planning on coming out, they'll be experiencing it. That's always good. Comment boxes, of course, you want to hear what people have to say or what they think about the event. Very important, get photos and data before and during. Multiple reasons, it's great content online. And using it for future applications, for future projects, or even future pop-up events to point back to and say, look at what we did. We had all these people come out and such. So, and thank your volunteers, of course.
Katie, something that I just realized when we did that Keene pop-up, we also had like a petition at the same time about a complete streets policy. Would you like to see a complete streets policy in Keene? And so it was a great place to co-locate that effort at the same time to sort of show the in this case city council that there's a great deal of support for this idea.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, coordinate that effort with the policy, with the pop-up. Great stuff. So I just very quickly kind of did a mock-up of a potential pop-up kind of concept drawing. So this is on Bethlehem's Main Street, and I did purposely choose nowhere that any of you are from, so we could have no bias here. But this is the section between we got Maple Street to over by the Methodist Church, if you're familiar. But the main hotspot in town is the Reckless Brewing, of course, and this area can get quite busy. So the first thing I see, I've got, we've got these great crosswalks, and we see that they've even marked off areas not to park, so that there is a little bit, better visibility for pedestrians. But I think you could take it up a notch. You could extend those curbs out a bit, and have people be able to stand, closer instead of all the way off to the side of the road before they start crossing. So there's opportunities to have curb extensions or curb bump outs. Next, this road is quite wide. There's a lot of room for things. So I think it'd be great if you put a temporary bike lane through on each side. And you typically, if you've got the room to do it, if you've got the ability to do it, to do travel lane, parking, and then bike lane next to the sidewalk, because there's less risk of that driver door opening and hitting cyclists. Cyclists are typically safer on the inside. And then maybe we got these kind of darker turquoise here. Maybe we put some of that activity stuff, some of that seating and greenery in these areas, kind of be those destination places. And I put these little blue dots here. Maybe you want to have a signpost that tells people, 5-minute walk this way to the park, or 2 minutes down this way are all these shops. So opportunities to put some wayfinding and signage in. So like I said, this is a very, very quick mock-up. And these are the prompts that I'll leave you with. We've got a few minutes. We can talk about some answers. But these are kind of the prompts you want to think about when you're outlining or starting to plan a pop-up. So what location is best that will enhance or activate an area? Coordination, back to this, I think we've touched on coordination in each section because it's very, very important. Those groups and departments and businesses, who needs to be involved, and not only for the support and the safety of it, but who can help you help provide volunteers or donate materials. There's all sorts of reasons you want to outline all of those different parties that can help. Resources, thinking about what you already have. Might be surprised to think about, you might be able to have a good volunteer base with a certain group, or you got materials left over from a town event recently. And again, thinking about the upcoming events, being able to merge those two efforts together to get more people to experience the pop-up. And then lastly, what type of elements that you want to do. You kind of do this with resources. It might depend on what resources and materials you have available to be able to do elements. But the elements should link back to your goals and your vision. So if your policy or what you're trying to achieve is safety, then you want elements like, improving crossings or making curb extensions, and maybe not focus quite as much about the greenery or such. But if you want to focus on place, then you do want to have all of those kind of active community type things. So I'll leave you with that, and we can end here. If anybody wants to talk about a kind of pop-up idea that they have in their community, or any other parting thoughts or things they want to share. And I'll be sending an email out to all you guys with the resources I've mentioned, the slides, everything. And I'm also available if you need help planning anything, any technical assistance, definitely reach out to me. I'm here to help.
I think, yeah, Katie, I think one of the things that you just hit on, I'm trying to keep it short. I usually don't, but the pop-up, I think, for a space that we've acquired in Franconia is ideal. The space is ideal for a pop-up, and I think we've gone round and round with ideas, and I think that would be something that can increase traffic and movement and have it really create a nice destination as a pop-up. So
yeah, absolutely. And maybe like JB mentioned, having something where you've got multiple different options for the intersection to kind of test out. You hear certain things from certain people, but if you got the different options presented, and you can kind of have people submit their a vote or something and gauge interest that way, there's all sorts of opportunities to fold in that other stuff. So
I was wondering if any of you would have any advice for me. Where there's the town of Easton is pretty small, and we have the main road through the town is 116, and we're just looking for a solution for some traffic calming on this road. It's already pretty narrow, but we do have a lot of bicyclists and pedestrians, runners using it. And the DOT did a speed study a few years ago and found that the speed limit is appropriate, if not even too low, so people are kind of blazing by, and we're just wondering if you have any ideas on what we could do.
I think I have to visit first. I'll take a drive down there. Probably do it after work today and see for myself and see what kind of short-term solutions there may be. I think a lot of the better solutions might be a long-term type thing, but see if there's any opportunities for a short-term improvement. I don't know, JB, if you've had any similar situations.
I'm not familiar with your town, so I think a lot of this is context sensitive. You know, depends on your goals, and we heard what your goals are, traffic calming, and some of the user groups that you have. Do you have any crosswalks or?
No, we don't have any. We have downtown is basically town hall and a fire station. So there's nothing much per se, but there's between the town hall and Sugar Hill Road is like a 1 mile stretch where there's quite many residences, and that's where mainly a lot of people are walking and running and.
Yeah.
Do you have
I think
Oh,
it's a
sorry.
good idea for Katie to just probably to follow up with you and check on the site and sounds like, you know, the pop-up ID might be a way to generate, you know, if you can come up with a concept, test something out and see if people like it. By the way, if you're working on a state route, the way that we've coordinated with DOT is what they did down here is you take out a parade permit. Basically, it's like as if you were going to have a parade in your town. And then you you just explain to them what you're planning to do. You usually do that through the maintenance district.
Yeah.
I'm assuming your district would be okay with that approach as well, but
We'll
don't
see.
know for sure.
Yeah, and it does get into a whole other case if there's any parking spots being removed temporarily. You have to show how that will be kind of mitigated, so to speak. But yeah, come take a look. And does Easton have any speed read back signs at all?
Oh, not currently.
Not currently. Okay. Yeah, maybe I'll reach out about that because I know quite a few towns up here got them. I don't know if they were part of some safety improvement program of sort, but I'll see if that's something that might be possible. Carl?
Yeah, I am very familiar with 116 down through Easton. And I guess my question would be for New Hampshire DOT on the speed limit thing. What Zach has raised is a particular area, say a mile long, that's of concern to the local residents in terms of walking and bicycling. It's the highest density. And so I would wonder if the DOT limits that it's a statement that it's an appropriate speed limit for the road is just based upon automobiles. Because and even if it is, does Easton have the ability to request and receive a lower speed limit through a critical section of the town? I know in the TAC, we've had discussions, I forget if it was Stewartstown or someplace up north where there was a long struggle to try to get a reduced speed limit through the town. And a question of the town safety versus the driving time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
typically and they're not wrong, but they point out reducing the speed won't necessarily, reducing the posted speed won't necessarily reduce the speed if the environment doesn't kind of support that. And you're right, unfortunately, they do the calculations, very methodically, very, doesn't necessarily take things, contextual, doesn't take context into account. It's the formulas that they have.
Yeah, the state also can't reduce the speed limit. I believe it's less than 35 by state law unless you're in a school. There's a school located right there on fronting the street. I believe that's the correct number. Zach, is it 35 through there or
Oh, no, it's 40, I think. Yeah.
40? Okay. But so they could, I think they can, they could go lower, but as Katie said, speeding is part psychology too. The motorist is going through, if they feel like it's a kind of a wide open space, they're going to feel more comfortable moving through there. So you're probably going to want to introduce some, one of the things you do is reduce lane width. Zach, and you said that your lanes are already pretty narrow.
Right.
The other thing you do is you create, there's medians, there's on-street parking, there's all these different things where you create more happening in that space to to get the drivers to slow down. And so those are some things to look at as well.
Okay. Thank you for the advice.
Yeah, and it'd be great if we could, show the studies, or it's not even I guess it is a study, but the math that shows a person getting hit by a 30-mile-per-hour vehicle has, 85% chance of survival, and as soon as it goes up to 40, it, cuts in half. Hope that be enough, but got to keep the cars moving, right? Awesome. I think I just have one slide here that has my email on it, but you guys should all have my email at this point, our website. And we are also on Instagram and Facebook. They're pretty much just transportation. Theoretically, there should be also the other happenings of the council on there, but I am the most active user of it right now. So you can get some cool pictures or some information on there as well. But yeah, I'll wrap it up. Sorry, we went a little bit over, and I will send out an email to you guys. And feel free to reach out at any point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.